Hey everybody, welcome to Bible 365. I am your host, Kathy Carter, and this is reading through the Bible in 365 days. So we are taking 1 year to read through the Bible in chronological order, which means historically, from beginning to end. 1 year, it's like 4 or so chapters a day, and we're using the 1 year chronological Bible reading plan, which you can find online at oneyearbibleonline.com. Okay. So that stuff being said, we are in the book of Kings today. So let me give you the basics. It is day 162, which puts us at June 10th on your calendar. And then we are in 1 Kings 15:16 through 17:7 and 2 Chronicles 16 and 17. From this kind of moment on in the book of Kings, we're eventually going to go to prophets. But in the book of Kings, there's a lot of information. This is historical. And this is, I have to tell you guys, if I haven't already, this is my favorite book. And so I wasn't sure if I was going to do this or not, but I want to make it a little bit easier for the reader. The times that I have done this, I have written myself a chart because it's confusing. There are a lot of kings, there's a lot of information, a lot of things happen, and so it's hard to keep track of. And so I'm going to try to keep us on track. And one of the ways I'm going to try and keep us on track is by my whiteboard, which is like my favorite thing in the whole world. So this is what I did. I'm hoping you can see it really well on camera. So this is the kings of Israel. Some of you are probably making fun of me this one. This is the kings of Israel. So this is the basics. This is what we're going to learn historically, right? So this is what I'm going to go over. So we had King David and we had King Solomon. Solomon is David's son, right? So that's why the arrow. They ruled all 12 tribes. 12 tribes came all together under King David. And then he conquered a lot of extra territory, which is where Solomon then ruled. And then after Solomon, because he messed up, if you remember, he turned from the Lord. He turned towards other gods because of all of his wives. And so when he turned away from the Lord, it broke into two kingdoms. And so it broke into the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. Judah was made up of Judah, right? So these tribes, the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin, and then all of the Levites fell under this as well. And the Levites were the ones who spoke to the Lord. So the Levites were the ones that were in the temple. They were the priests of all of the area. The kingdom of Israel did not have any of the Levites in it. So they were all over in the tribe of Judah. And then the tribe of Israel was, or the kingdom of Israel was the 10 other tribes. And the Lord said, because of Solomon's turning away from the Lord, because the evil that he had done in the sight of God, he was going to take 10 tribes and give them to Jeroboam. If Jeroboam followed the Lord faithfully, he was going to create a dynasty with Jeroboam. But what we found out a few days ago is that did not happen. Jeroboam did evil in the sight of the Lord. The priests wound up coming over here because Jeroboam made new priests. So he was just like, let's make some golden calves and let's make some new priests, and then we'll just worship the Lord up there that way, even though that is not at all what God has told them to do. So Rehoboam ruled here, Jeroboam ruled over here, and so that's where we are. So it was broken up into two pieces, right? And then from there, we saw that Rehoboam's son, Abijah, was then the ruler after that, and then the ruler after that was Asa. And I think that's where we left off yesterday. Asa was a good king. He followed the Lord. He was from the tribe of Judah, but he was also from the line of David, because this kingdom is all going to be the line of David. And so Asa was the line of David, and he was a good king. He loved the Lord. That is not true of any of these kings over in this section. So we went from Jeroboam to his son Nadab, and then Baasha killed Nadab and Jeroboam's whole family, and then he wound up taking over. And then we left off, I believe, with Elon up there. So this is kind of where we're finishing off today. So if you see, I'm trying to give a little bit more information. Jehoshaphat is one of the kings. He's the son of Asa, and he's a good king. And then we see that Zimri ruled for 7 days. Omri and Tibni went to war, and then Omri ruled, and then we leave off today with the king of Ahab. So let's hope that this sticks. I'm probably also going to try and take a picture of this and then put it in maybe the comments. Maybe I'll put it at the end so you can really see it a little bit better than that. But this is sort of like a reference of when you see that I'm talking about certain people. So it's a little bit of a reference. Okay, so I hope that gave you a little bit of information that can help you. And now we're going to go into the scriptures from there. So today is June 10th, and we are starting this war between Baasha and Asa. Asa, good king in Judah. Baasha, evil king in the northern tribe, which is Israel. So it says in verse 16, there was a war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, throughout their reigns. So throughout the whole time that Baasha reigned, there was a war. This is not throughout the whole time Asa reigned. So one of the things that I didn't write on the board, because I feel like it's too much information, is how long, like the kings weren't ruling simultaneously, right? So Asa ruled for, I want to say like 41 years or something like that. We were going to find out. And Baasha did not rule anywhere near that long. So like there might have been 2 or 3 kings for the same amount of time that Asa ruled. So during Baasha's reign, there was perpetual war between him and Asa. So Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and fortified Ramah to prevent anyone from leaving or entering the territory of Asa, king of Judah. So he's blocking the entrance, essentially, to go inside this kingdom or for anyone to come outside of this kingdom. So he was blocking the entrance, blocking the gates, right? Because there were gates up. It wasn't like now necessarily where everyone can kind of come and go. Like around the city, there were gates and there were walls, just like with Jericho. So Asa then sold all of this stuff to an outside king, to a foreign king. And he said, listen, I want you to come to my aid. And so we're going to find out later that there's a punishment because of this, because instead of coming to God, he turned to a different king, and obviously it was a foreign king. And so then he says in verse 20, he says that Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asa and sent the commanders of his forces against the towns of Israel. And he conquered a whole bunch of towns. And then in verse 22, King Asa issued an order to all Judah, no one was exempt, and they carried away from Ramah the stones and the timber and kind of like used it to build up their own territories. So they wound up winning this war. So that's great. They wound up winning. But Asa didn't depend on the Lord. He depended on somebody else. Then moving on to Second Chronicles, they're talking about this second thing again. But one of the things it says is verse 8, were not the Cushites and Libyans a mighty army with great numbers of chariots and horsemen? Yet when you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to them. You have done a foolish thing, and from now on you'll be at war. So because of this, now Asa is going to be at war. This is a great line. It says, I'm repeating it. It's the same thing. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. I have been listening to a lot of contemporary music. I really enjoy contemporary Christian music. But I'm kind of struggling with the lyrics the longer I'm actually reading this chronological Bible. I'm struggling with the lyrics a lot because the lyrics are super like me focused. And that's not really what I see so far in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is very much like God focused, God focused, God focused. And when things were going bad, it was because they were so me focused. They were actually turned away from God and turned towards themselves. And then all the times I see these revivals and all these other things that happen, it's because they actually turn back to the Lord, not because the Lord sort of drags them and revives them, right? Like they actually have a turning to the Lord. Like Asa tears down all the Asherahs, right? He tears down some of the high places. He brings back all the decrees and the laws of the Lord. And that's going to make it really, really difficult for people in the land because they're used to living a certain way. And now this ruler comes in and he's like, no. God wants you to live this way. So I'm changing everything you guys are doing and I'm bringing it in this way. So when we ask God to bring a revival, there's a very, very, I want to say clear. I'm going to put it clear. Very, very clear understanding that your life is going to change, right? Because you're not going to be able to be in the midst of both worlds. You're not going to be able to go, oh, I'm so glad that God loves me, even though I continue to do a lot of these things that I am not really supposed to do, but I kind of excuse them because God gives me grace and mercy, right? Like if revival comes, it's because we have all dropped our selfish nature and have all turned towards the Lord. And the good news is when we do that, God is there, right? So, oh, I dropped my place because I wanted to go back to that verse. So when we do that, God is there because it says his eyes range throughout the earth. So he's watching us. He knows everything that you're doing. He knows where your heart is. He knows what you're putting first, right? If you're putting him first or something else first, he understands that. And he says he's going to strengthen your heart. So when you start to put him first, then he's going to give you strength, right? To get revival in your own heart. He's going to give you strength. And then he's going to, so to those whose hearts are hearts are fully committed to him. So then obviously Asa was not that. And then in verse 10 it says, Asa then was angry with the seer. So the person who comes to tell him this, he was angry at that guy. God's the one who said it, but he's angry with the seer. And this is what he does. He was so enraged, he puts the guy in prison. And then he brutally oppressed his people. Guys, don't shoot the messenger. This is why prophets don't want to be prophets. Like, it's a prophet in some of these things is somebody that hears from the Lord, right? Whether it be through his word, because we have his scripture, or whether it be through visions or dreams, or he comes and directly speaks to those people. And they go and they share with people because they want people to turn back to the Lord. They want people to have hearts that are for the Lord because it's better for them, right? It's not better for the prophet. The prophet's not like, oh man, if my neighbor loves the Lord, I'm going to have such an easier life. Like, it has nothing to do with the prophet. And it has everything to do with the person that the prophet is speaking to. And so if somebody is speaking to you and they're asking you to turn your heart to the Lord, listen, right? Dig your heart in and do the work, because they're calling you out to the Lord. They're calling you out for a better outcome for your life, not for their life. It has nothing to do with the prophet. And this prophet, and most of the major and minor prophets that we see in scripture, either die or get put in prison or get beaten or scourged, or right? Like, that's mostly what we see anyway. All right, so, and that's why I thought I wrote this note. Somebody's really jamming out next to me. I wrote this note, don't shoot the messenger. I feel like this is kind of where it came from, right? So all the way back here in scripture. All right, so then in verse 1 of 1 Kings 16, it says, then the word of the Lord came to Jehu, son of Hanani, concerning Baasha. Verse 2, it says, this is what he says, I lifted you up from the dust and appointed you ruler over my people Israel, but you followed the ways of Jeroboam and cursed my people Israel to sin, to arouse my anger by their sins. So I want to follow up with the second verse. So first verse says, this is what the Lord says, I lifted you up. Okay, I want you to hold and stay with that, because this is one of those things that gets me, right? So he says in verse 7, I'm going to follow up in verse 7. Moreover, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Jehu, son of Hanani, because of all the evil he had done in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger by the things he did, becoming like the house of Jeroboam, and also because he destroyed it. So he destroyed the house of Jeroboam and became king, but God says, I lifted you up from the dust and appointed you king. Where do we put that? Right? This evil guy destroys, so through prophecy, by the way, destroys Jeroboam, is lifted up and becomes king, and then he becomes evil in his eyes. And you know what? I'm just thinking about it because I'm thinking God gave him an opportunity, right? He lifted him up, followed what he said he was going to do by destroying the family of Jeroboam, because Jeroboam was evil, gave him the opportunity to do good, and he didn't. Right? And then he followed all the wicked ways of Jeroboam. So now I'm just putting those pieces together. Let me know what you guys think of that. I'd love that. So Elah, his son, succeeds him as king. And I have that written over here. Again, I'm going to show you a picture of it later. So then in verse 8 it says, in the 26th year of Asa, he's the king in Judah, of Asa of Judah, Elah, son of Baasha, becomes king in Israel. And he only reigns 2 years. So we're going to see tons of kings in the land of Israel. So in verse 9, because it says here, this is why he reigned 2 years, Zimri, one of his officials, who had command of half his chariots, plotted against him. So here we go. So it's like murder and mayhem all over the tribe of Israel. So it says Zimri came in, struck him down, and killed him in the 27th year of Asa. So while Asa was still king in Judah, this is what happened. Then he succeeded him as king. As soon as he began to reign and was seated on the throne, he killed off Baasha's whole entire family. Moving down into verse 15, it says, in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned in Tirzah 7 days. 7 days. So the king before him was 2 years. Zimri's only 7 days. There was an army there, and then when the Israelites heard that Zimri plotted against the king, they murdered him, and then they told Omri, which was the guy in charge of them, to go be king. So now we have Elah, right? We had Baasha, then we have Elah, Then we have Zimri, and now we have Omri. Yeah, Omri. So that's 4 kings. Asa is still king over Judah, and we've got boom, 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 4 kings in a row. Then it gets worse. Omri and all the Israelites withdrew with him to lay siege to Tirzah. So we follow up here, 21, verse 21. Then the people of Israel were split into 2 factions. Half of them supported Tibni, son of Ginath, for king, and the other half supported Omri. So now Israel, the entire kingdom of Israel is split into 2 pieces: Judah, Benjamin, Levi, 10 other tribes. Drop this, Judah, right? Then that splits again, following Omri, following Tibni, right? So now we've got that 10, and they're split into 2 until Omri winds up winning, and then they all wind up following Omri. But during this time, like, they're in war, they're fighting against each other, there's death, there's destruction, there's unrest, right? There's all these bad things that are happening. So it says, then Tibni dies, and Omri becomes king. So in the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, Omri becomes king of Israel, and he reigns 12 years. And this is what I'm fascinated with, what he does. This actually goes forward into the future, but I want to hold on to this note so we remember it and come back. One of the things he does is, this is all about Samaria. He builds up Samaria. So it says, in Omri's reign, what he did and the things he achieved, are they not written in the annals of the kings of Israel? He rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria. And Ahab his son succeeded him as king. Eventually, Samaria is going to be a place that Israel thinks is unclean. Right? So right now, Samaria is sort of like a hub of these evil kings in the kingdom of Israel. Eventually, Samaria is going to be considered an unclean place. So I'm sure these things are connected. There's a long memory in the land of Israel, in the people of Israel. So then verse 29, in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, becomes king of Israel, and he reigns in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. And he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. Not only did he allow his wife, right? So Jezebel comes in, she's from Sidonian. Not only does he allow her to come in, he marries a foreign wife, but then he follows that God, he serves that God, and he worships that God. So according to the Lord, this is the worst king that has reigned yet. He's the worst of all of them. Verse 34, in Ahab's time, Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. Don't know if you guys remember this story, but we're going to go back to it. He laid his foundations at the cost of his firstborn son, Abiram. He set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub, in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken by Joshua, son of Nun. Now, in Joshua 6, I had this, but of course it fell through. In Joshua 6, 26, at that time, Joshua pronounced this solemn oath, because if you remember, Jericho was burned. It was the first city that they went in the tribes of Israel. So Moses had combined all those tribes of Israel from Egypt. The 40 years had ended, and then they were all going to come into the land of Jericho, into the land of Israel, right, and take over that land. Jericho was the first city. They burned that entire city to the ground, right? They didn't plunder it. They didn't take anything from it. It was all burned to the ground. So it says, at that time, Joshua pronounced this solemn oath: cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. So if you think about rebuilding this, you're going to be cursed. And here's the curse: at the cost of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest, he will set up its gates. So this guy fulfilled that prophecy. I'm having speech problems today. The prophecy, and his oldest died and his youngest died because he insisted on building up Jericho. Okay, now we've got Ahab. Here we go. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah. So Asa is still on the throne in Judah. Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel. He reigned in Samaria 22 years. All right. And then as for all the other events of Asa's reign, so now we're moving on to Asa in verse 23. As for all the other events of Asa's reign, all of his achievements, all he did and the cities he built, are they not written in the book of the kings of Judah? Great. And then in his old age, his feet became diseased. Then Asa rested with his ancestors and was buried with them. So now we're going to find out a little bit about these diseased feet. So it says in the 41st year of his reign, Asa died and rested with his ancestors. They buried him in the tomb they had cut out for him. Okay, one of the things that he does in his 39th year, so he lasts 2 years with these diseased feet, it says that he got afflicted with a disease in his feet. Though it was severe, even in his illness, he did not seek help from the Lord, only from the physicians. This is possibly a misused verse, right? Like, so if someone sees this, they might go, oh, well, I never need to go to a doctor. I only need to seek the Lord. And while there is truth, you must seek the Lord in all things. That does not mean disregard physicians. It means don't put a physician, right? Going back to even everything Solomon said, all this stuff is meaningless, right? It's vanity, it's meaningless. Don't seek a physician above seeking the Lord. Always answer to the Lord first. And the Lord will be, sorry, drop the mic. The Lord will, I'm sure, going to a physician is extremely important. Maintaining your health is important. All of those things are really important. But when you're in any place, seeking the Lord is the most important thing, right? So ignoring that and just being like, oh, this doctor is going to fix everything I do, and I'm not even going to seek out anything with the Lord. There was his mistake. This was the king, right? And he was supposed to be seeking the Lord in all things. And then he gets this major disease and affliction, and he never even talks to the Lord about it. He just goes to doctors. And so I just wanted to note that, because I don't want you to read it and either ignore it and be like, oh, that doesn't mean anything, gloss over it, or to take it like, wow, does that mean I shouldn't ever go to the doctors? Because of course that wouldn't be true. Okay. Coming near the end here. We're in 2 Chronicles 17. Jehoshaphat, Asa's son, succeeded him as king and strengthened himself against Israel. So he stations all these troops. And verse 3, this is another good king, and I have that written over there. He's another good king. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he followed the ways of his father David before him. And what does that mean? David was a man after the Lord's heart. That's what that means. It doesn't mean he had a lot of money, or he built a lot of kingdoms, or he had a lot of wives, right? Like, none of that. It means that he followed the Lord in all of his ways. In the 3rd year of his reign, he sent officials, Ben-Hail, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nethanel, Micah, all these people, and to the towns of Judah. They all went out to teach. So he brought all these guys. He took all the law with him. So he took all of these, what we would call the Torah, the Old Testament books. He took all of them with him. He went out to all the towns in his territory, and he had all of his leaders teaching the people in that area. It says he took with him the book of the law of the Lord. And then in verse that's what I was saying earlier, like, it's not a magic pill to build revival, right? To have revival. I know we want revival, and I love getting a prophecy like revival is coming, and I love the sound of it and the heart of it and the idea of it, but it's not something that doesn't take place inside of our own hearts, right? Like, revival isn't God making you do something that you weren't going to do, right? It's you turning towards the Lord, and then him essentially rewarding that faith that you have in him. And then we do that as a people, especially if our leaders, right? Because you know me and my soapbox about leaders. If our leaders turn towards the Lord in all things, right? Revival is going to come. If they do the things that are necessary and required, and they stop fearing people, and instead they fear the Lord and the Lord only, because the Lord protects, and they fear the Lord even if something's going to happen, right? We're going to see stories where they were like, I'm not afraid of you, king. I'm only afraid of the Lord, and so I'm not going to do what you say. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to say, like, yeah, someone's not going to accept me if I pray at the table. Someone's not going to accept me if I wear a shirt that says Jesus. Someone's not going to accept me if I follow this and don't follow that. Like, if I don't go out and party and drink with them, but instead I pray at my meal, like whatever that might be, whatever it is you're thinking, right? Because we all have our own personal strongholds, barriers up against what we're afraid of, and every person is different. Because I might have said those three things, and someone went, "I can do all of those things," right? There's something for you. What are you afraid of instead of being afraid of the Lord? And fear of the Lord is the most important thing. We already learned that through Proverbs over and over again, through Ecclesiastes, right? Through all the things of Solomon. All right, so then because of all this, the fear of the Lord fell on all the kingdoms because they were being taught, they were learning, they were growing, they were strengthening, right? The leaders were out there and praising the Lord and worshiping. And it says the fear of the Lord fell on all the kingdoms of the land surrounding Judah, so that they did not go to war against Jehoshaphat. Because of this, God protected them from everybody surrounding them. Some Philistines brought gifts, right? And then their armies got built up, their finances got built up, the kingdom was blessed, all these good things were happening to them. And then we move down. It says, these were the men, in verse 19, it says, these were the men who served the king, besides those he stationed in the fortified cities of Judah. Fortified cities of Judah, right? So it lists all the people. And now we move down and we're going to meet Elijah. Elijah the Tishbite from Tishba in Gilead said to Ahab. Now we're going to, so that was Judah, that was southern kingdom, right? Now we're going back up to northern kingdom, where so far we have not had one good king, and Ahab is the king, and we meet Elijah. Elijah the Tishbite from Tishba in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve. So this was obviously a man of the Lord, this Elijah. We're going to learn a lot more about Elijah. There will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. So God, I'm making a jump. We're going to see it in a little bit. God spoke to Elijah, right? Encouraged Elijah to go out and speak to the king. I can't even imagine what this like. The king was, imagine any of our leaders right now, right? I'm going to be brave and bold, and I'm going to say none of our leaders are following the Lord. None of it, things wouldn't look the way that they look if our leaders were diligently following the Lord, seeking guidance from the Lord, loving on the Lord in all ways, and then speaking openly about the Lord, right? So I'm going to say that our leaders aren't like that. This was the same way, right? So their leaders were, and even so far to say, like, this leader was serving a different God, right? And he was letting his wife run amok, and they were serving a different God, worshiping a different God. And he goes up to this guy. He's got no power. He's a nobody. He's got no power. He goes up to this guy and he says, hey, by the way, famine in your land until I say so. Like, the boldness of that is outrageous. I can't imagine being compelled to do that and then what that would look like. So then the word of the Lord comes to Elijah, and he said, do you hear me still saying my words all wrong? Leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. And so he gave this message. After he gives the message, the Lord is like, okay, now you got to go hide. So he gives this message to this king, dangerous, go and hide now, because essentially your life is in danger. And then as he's out there, ravens are bringing him food. So imagine the grace and the miracles of the Lord. The ravens are bringing him food. He's drinking water from the brook, and he's getting all kinds of food. He's getting like fruit, and he's getting meat. And then he's drinking from the brook until the brook dries up and he can no longer drink from the brook anymore. So that's verse 7. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. So what he said came true, and that's where we're ending today. I hope this helped. I don't know if it did at all, but I'm going to continue to do that, and I'm just going to try and, as diligently as possible, add some more kings in there so I don't have to go back to the beginning every single time. And again, I'll probably add pictures in as I see fit so you guys can see them. And that's it. If this was a blessing to you, which I really hope it was, I hope it was helpful. I'd love to see your comments. And I would like for you to share this page. I want you to like the channel. I want you to subscribe to the channel, or like the video, I should say. Subscribe to the channel. And if you have not been reading up to this point, I want you to jump in and read with me. It is amazing and awesome information. So read it. Join me tomorrow, and I will see you then.